brought my dad in. So my dad and I have been staying in contact through this. I've been getting some drilling in. So I'm going to be demonstrating on him. He's a purple belt under me. I know that some of you aren't able to get out to the gym, so you might be training with significant others or people in your household. So I'm also going to give some cues that you might be able to give to your training partners to make their life a little bit easier as a partner. So as Elliott mentioned, I come from a strong wrestling background, and I came from Guelph. I saw Andrew Garrett gave a shout out. He's a Guelph alumni as well. One of the things that Guelph was known for when I was wrestling there was the front headlock. And a front headlock is something that I think hasn't fully transitioned to grappling the way it probably could or should. I think it's a very, very strong position. And in fact, when I rank the hierarchy of positions in no-gi, back control is obviously king, but I put front headlock right underneath that and mount a distant third behind those two. So we're going to talk a little bit about the front headlock position in terms of control. We're going to talk about setting up some attacks from a solid control position, and then some predictable reactions that come from those attacks that we can recount. We're going to start with some basic drills to help you guys out. You can do this on your own. If you want to slide back there. So first drill we're going to do is a simple sit-through drill. And a sit-through drill has enormous potential everywhere in grappling, from fixing failed shots to escaping towards the back. Now my dad has a bit of a banged up shoulder, so we're going to show a limited mobility version and then ramp that up through a couple of different ranges. So to start, we're going to be on all fours with our knees planted. Okay. You're going to lift your left hand and you're going to move your right knee diagonally forward underneath your body and sit to your hip like so. Very good. You can see my dad at the end of that range of motion is also turning his chest up to the ceiling. Very important to emulate wrestling. We come back and do the same thing on the other side. Lift that right hand, knee slides forward to the hand, and then open the chest to the ceiling. And we come on back. Very good, and that's to make it a little bit easier if you have shoulder injuries or maybe back injuries that the twisting is a little bit difficult. A more full iteration of that drill, I'll demo this one, Dad, is where we come up to all fours like so, and same thing. We're going to lift our right hand and we're going to kick our left foot diagonally forward to where that left hand was sitting. You turn your chest up towards the ceiling as well. Come back, same thing on the other side. Now, a couple of meaningful details in this movement drill. A lot of times people will move their feet laterally, where it just comes across their hip, and this doesn't do a lot for you. It actually can isolate your lumbar spine in an uncomfortable way, and it's a lateral movement instead of moving forward. What we want to do is bring our foot to where our hand is. It actually drives forward. It's an advancing movement, and this lets us change that position. Same thing on the other side. We drive forward, okay? We can use this as a very basic movement drill. You can use this as a warm-up drill or even a pretty intense conditioning drill. I'll have it as a burnout at the end of class, 30 seconds as hard and fast as you can with these sit-throughs, and it's quite challenging. It's quite exhausting. If you want to add on, there's also some value in a back step motion across this sit-through, and I'll show you what that looks like. So we start same way, all fours posted up like this. Left foot is going to move forward towards my right hand. I sit through and I just touch my hip down. Now, without taking the tension out of either my hand or my foot, I come back, I post my hand, and I kick up and over, exposing my chest to the ceiling on the other side. Okay, then we come back. Now we're doing the same thing on the other side. Left hand, I kick forward and underneath. I come, you'll see I switch my hands, foot not touching, and I turn all the way up and over, exposing the chest to the ceiling. Now this isn't just, yoga. There is some real meaningful movements in a sequence of attack that can come from those drills. So you want to get to the point, not that those drills are just easy, but you can do them with no thought or compunction whatsoever, and that's when they'll start to show up in your game. Jump into the control now, and I really have to emphasize this. This is where people go wrong the most, when they're not eliciting good control in a front headlock position, and then they try to transition to a guillotine, or they try and transition to a choke or the back. we really have to shut wrestling down first, and then you can attack. And way too often I see people dive to a guillotine instead of addressing the wrestling. And that's a big problem. If you're doing that habitually in your game, you need to do the work to shut down wrestling, and then you have the option. You can dive to a guillotine if it's the right choice, or you stay in a top position and continue to threaten the back. So we're going to look at controlling this front headlock position. So if you have a partner, you can start drilling along. You guys can hear me okay at this distance? Yeah, okay. So your partner's gonna be on all fours facing you like this. They can drop down to their elbows if their shoulders are banged up, and this still works just fine. Okay, one hand is gonna be cupping the chin, okay, like so, and that elbow turns in tightly against my ribs. My shoulder comes to where the t-shirt tag is on the shirt, the upper back. A lot of times people slide way too far down towards the hips, so they don't elicit any real control across the shoulder girdle. We want to be up here across the upper part of the body, okay? I'm not resting on my knees. I've got my body weight resting on my opponent's body. They're supporting this weight. This is work for them just to exist here, and my outside hand is on the tricep, okay? Controlling that tricep tightly. Now, we're very fortunate. We have Chris Prickett as a coach here. He's an incredible wrestler. He's the assistant coach at Brock. And he was talking to me a little bit about how wrestling has changed since I was an active competitor. And he said they don't really control the chin anymore. They turn the elbow in tightly as a wedge against the trap. And what that does is it keeps the head from sliding out. Now, the reason I've chosen to retain that chin control, because we're always looking to slide our hand underneath and threaten short chokes, it provides an opportunity to pry that open or jump to that opportunity if you feel it. So it's maybe not wrestling dogma anymore, but I still feel there's some real value in there. A couple of the details to pay attention to. You want to come a bit closer, Dad? I want to keep the crown of my opponent's head. Both my dad and I have matching targets right at the top of our head. We want to keep that target right in your top two abs, right here. Not lower, not higher, certainly not side to side. This is where we're resting our weight. Another way to think about it, you take the broadest part of your chest and you lay it across the broadest part of your opponent's back. That gives you the most amount of contact and really does control this position. Okay? And finally, slide back a bit, Dad. I go gentle just because my dad's shoulders are a little banged up, so I'm resting my knees on the ground to support my partner so I don't bang them up. In reality, my weight would be up. What I want to do in this position is pull, okay? A front headlock is always a pulling position. If I drive into my partner, which is a really tempting thing to do in this position, what you're actually doing is loading your opponent's posterior chain, which gives them the opportunity to bridge out. As you pull them forward, you're breaking them off their base. You're breaking them into a fundamentally weak position, which means we now don't really have to worry about re-wrestling. We don't have to worry about people attacking our hips until they build their base, and we come back pulling this position. So controlling the chin, controlling the tricep, we're pulling our opponent forward, and if you want, I'm a pretty aggressive grappler. I always want to be hurting my opponent, making them uncomfortable, not injuring, but hurting. I want to pull the chin and the tricep apart, okay? You're pulling the shoulder girdle apart as you're driving the weight down. And again, this all compromises your opponent's ability to wrestle. And we need that to be taken away from them before we can attack, okay? Any questions about this initial control position? Hand on the chin, elbow turned in, shoulder on the back, controlling the tricep, pulling apart like so. Everybody feels good. Excellent. Okay, ready to move close to that? So we're going to start. We'll see how the time goes. This is a much broad. Yeah, for sure. The chin the hand is literally just cupped like this, and I actually think about cupping the chin. Lift your head up with the dad. Just like so. So as I'm pulling, I'm already in a position that hand can just slide forward into lots of different threatening chokes. That's a good question. And actually, that brings up another really important point. I know we've got a lot of really esteemed grapplers on this seminar today, and I know a lot of you are gi-based guys. I'm going to say something rather controversial. I think the grips in no-gi matter more. I think they matter more. Thinking about them matters more because there's so much fewer of them. If you have to climb a wall with 100 handholds, that's easier than climbing a wall with 10 handholds. You have to be more thoughtful about what you do. So I am going to be defining grips and some of those choices and why one might be better than another through the course of this seminar. So if there's questions about that, certainly ask. Our initial threat is going to be, slide back a bit, Ed, is going to be sliding the hand that's on the chin to cover this outside arm. And I want to start to threaten this pull across, okay? That's not always easy to do. That's a pretty strong body position. A lot of people will just base out, and that's actually exactly what we're kind of hoping for. If you get somebody that you're a little bit stronger than, we can pull this arm across, clear to the back, or adjust to a Hobson-Mura arm-in guillotine. There's some really cool stuff off a successful attempt. We're going to look today what happens, though, when we get that base out. Okay, so I've slid this arm through. I'm starting to pull across as my opponent resists out. That arm drives. I'm just going to tuck this thumb up like so. Now, first grip that we're going to play with. This is a supinated grip. This is a supinated grip. Easy way to remember, like you're carrying a bowl of soup. You put your hand on that platter, and then you're going to push up, trying to get thumb to shoulder. Now, this is a quick and dirty choke. Okay, it's not something that lists an enormous amount of control. If you remember, John Jones finished Lyoto Machida with this exact choke, but his back, it was in Toronto actually, his back was against the cage though, so there was nowhere for Machida to dive outside to side. So that's where the trade-off is. We get it quick, it's on the neck right away, but there's also a range of motion that your opponent can move through that can take some getting used to. Okay, let's look at the finish really quick though. So we're pulling through, this hand shoots up. I get my supinated grip, and I want to step to the hip, like so, okay? Now from here, I'm just going to push up. Let's turn this way, Ed. Okay, so we're pulling across this way as that arm opens up. You feel a base, you can see my hand shoots up. Palm is facing towards my chest, okay? I get that supinated grip. Now, the reaction that you're likely to see, and let me know if you're okay with this, Dad, the reaction you're likely to see is your opponent diving to the side. As I start to push up, they roll, this the other way, to this side, they roll to this side, pull to this side, like so, and they roll out. Now, if we step to the hip, we're in a really solid position to follow that cascade. Great. Come on over here. So we've got our supinated grip. I step to the hip, and my opponent falls across and over now. Okay, I post my hand to slow this down. I post my head, and then I step over to mount. Okay. Now from here, the big mistake that people make with this finish is like an upward-facing dog. That's maybe the best analogy. The way if you ever do yoga, where people will drive their hips and try to lift up on their opponent, and that, it feels like you're going to pop their head off. But somebody with a strong neck, a flexible neck, or a really strong will isn't going to tap to that kind of neck pressure. Maybe they check their blind spot for 2 weeks by turning their chest, but it doesn't shut them off. What we want to get is a rotation. Okay, so any of you that have any striking experience, if you think about the way you would flex in your boxing stance to protect your liver, it's that same idea. You're flexing the line of your lat. And I think about, this is kind of a sick analogy, but if you're a Game of Thrones fan, one of the seasons, they catch a bunch of slavers and they crucify them, but they crucify them by nailing one of their hands to their chest, right? That's the mental image that I have when I'm attacking this mounted guillotine, is my palm is nailed to my chest. And I can pivot around that center point, I can flex my lat, but I can't slide my hand up or down, and I can't pull it forwards or backwards off my chest. That downward compression is where we get this finish. You just want to jump them out. That's just going to pop that shoulder. So again, the two different ways to finish this incorrectly, okay, is where people push and lift up, okay, almost more like a wrestling pin. Slide back a little bit. Just see this here. Okay, and then if we want the correct finish, you drop your weight, okay, and I rotate my right elbow to my right hip. And you can see I go very, very gentle there because there's such an enormous amount of leverage in that ratcheting style grip. Okay, so that full range of motion, I'll talk through it and then demo it. We'll go slow. I'm pulling as my opponent reacts, right? They pull their elbows back, they widen their base. we can slip that grip underneath. We're throwing the supinated grip on, quick attack, but not a lot of control. But we know that there's only one avenue of escape, and that's that kind of diving sideways roll. So we hit the supinated grip, we step to the hip, knowing that we're going to follow them over, and the cascading series of controls that we're eliciting, hand on the mat, head on the mat, stepping over to mount, and then that pinned hand finish. Let's look at this full iteration. So we're pulling, as they base, we hit that supinated grip, I'm stepping to this hip. They're going to fall to that outside hip, I post my hand, I post my head, I step over, and I drop my body weight. Sometimes you catch this arm, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, to finish, there's no upward facing dog, it's that lat flex, protecting the liver, if you want to use that analogy. Okay, so supinated grip, quick, dirty, not much control. That's one of the toughest things about jiu-jitsu. At a certain point, you can only sharpen your knife so much, right? You can only sharpen your knife so much. What I think the best thing to do is to go through the mental exercise. Well, I had a wrestling coach in university, Andrew, good friends, Doug Cox. And Doug Cox told me when I was recovering from an injury, you still come into practice. You still come into practice and you watch the technique, you think about it, you think about how you would do this. And he said, no, it's not as good as training. It's better than nothing. And he talked to me about a study that he had seen where they had basketball players shooting free throws for 3 hours a day. And they had another group that was watching somebody shoot free throws for 3 hours a day. And at the end of 2 months, there wasn't an enormous difference in either group's ability to perform that task. So yes, it requires a great deal of mental attention and thought to get anything out of this type of drilling, but there is value there. There is value there. And I think in the long run, after this is passed, you'll feel better for having done that work. So tough question. If you don't have a partner, choke a pillow, practice on the grips on the pillow, and think about it a lot. So what we've done, and this comes back to a broader philosophy that I have in jiu-jitsu. If you can define the finite number of ways that your opponent can react, you then have a strategy for everything that you're going to see. So we're trying to put our opponents in a position where there's only a few things that they can do. So in this supinated grip, his head's wedged, my elbow's tucked, and the grip is very strong on that side. The only thing they can do is start to roll out. And to Elliott's point, it is very effective. There's many times front headlock I've been attacking this and ending up in a top side control instead of a finished fight or a mount. So the defense here that we're talking about, I'm going to attack on this side head. So as your opponent starts to push up, just go right to the supinated choke. So elbow through. As your opponent starts to push up, you're rolling out this way. It's going with the direction that they're trying to attack. And because you have so much inertia moving, it can be really difficult to hold that position. And occasionally you'll get into just free-form scrambles. That's why part of the fundamental entrance of this attack is that side step to the hip, right? Because it shrinks the space so significantly that you're trying to cover. What I'm really focused on is keeping my body weight pinned on my hand. Okay, if there's any space there, your opponent's going to start to dig their fingers in and pull down and shrug up and just be a pain in the ass to finish. Okay, and that's why I don't use a two-handed grip when I'm mounted. It's a weaker strangle. There's more space for your opponent to defend. So by planting my hand, I'm in a really solid position. Now that being said, in this particular attack, I always lace my legs. I always lace my legs because when you're totally committed on the head, if your opponent really blasts your hips, it might be enough to lose on either side. Just, go. So I call this when I'm teaching this to beginners, I call it the skydiver body position. If you ever watched a skydiver fall where they kind of lead with their chest and their hands and their legs are trailing behind, it's a good mental image. Good mental image to keep it in our head. So I've got the hand essentially on my opponent's sternum. I'm dropping my body weight, and then yes, I curl my heels into the hamstrings. I cross my ankles, but even more than that, I flare my knees up into a kind of a butterfly position. And then even that body position alone you're probably 65% of the way to an effective strangle, just with all that weight isolated. And then your opponent has to decide between trying to wedge something under their chin or sticking on the hips and trying to escape. I'll show one more grip detail, because this one's kind of cool. It's something I got from Marcelo Garcia that I've had a lot of luck with. But before I forget, last thing I want to say about the front headlock position. One of the reasons I think it's really worth investing in, there's 3 ways to win. Right? There's 3 ways to win in that front headlock position. You finish the fight right there. You finish the fight right there with a Darce, an Anaconda, one of these guillotine options. 2, taking the back is always the mirror option between a submission threat from front headlock and a positional attack. As they withdraw to protect their neck, the back will open up almost 100% of the time. And the 3rd way to win is with a throw. Right, by throwing your opponent to a weaker position, and maybe from there entering into one of the more complex strangles like a Darce or an Anaconda. No gi, I think it is the second most dominant position to control. Okay, so the last grip that we're going to look at is a modified ratchet grip that I learned from Marcelo Garcia. So if you think about a basic gable grip, palm on palm, your thumb sits in the crease of your wrist, and we wrap our fingers around. Your thumb also should never be in that grip. I've dislocated my thumb a bunch and it sucks. So no thumbs in those grips. Okay, Marcelo Garcia's ratchet grip, you invert your hand. So instead of having your thumb sit in the crease of the wrist, you have your pinky finger sit in the crease of the wrist. Now what this does, you can actually even see from this angle, as I push my top elbow down, it levers this part of my wrist into a strangle. This is something I talk about all the time with my students. This is something we call the cutting knife. It's an exposed bone on your wrist, and it doesn't matter if you're big and muscular or you're skinny, that should always be a viable weapon that we can use. So in practice, setup is exactly the same. The entrance is exactly the same, because we still end up with that palm forward hand position. Supinated grip was the first option. On this one, we invert our hands like so, and then I'm aiming to get the elbow to the spine. Okay, turn this way for me, Dad. Okay, so again, palm is facing away. I've got that inverted ratchet grip, and my elbow goes to the spine, just like so. And as I get downward pressure on the spine, you'll get upward pressure on this cutting knife. It actually acts very much like a literal guillotine, like a blade cutting into the head. So you can use that as a quick, dirty finish as well, without having to adjust position. And because Elliott was talking about that diving, rolling escape, this also addresses that problem, because by laying my elbow over that shoulder, if my opponent tries to dive, they're pushing into the leverage point. So it immediately tightens that across the throat. My name is Snoop Roar on Instagram. We've got Parabellum MMA and Parabellum Quintet, and I mean, you know, with the world is in the state that it is, who knows what's going to happen? But I really want to put on another show this year. That's the hope. So if you guys follow, give me some suggestions about who you want to see compete. We can get something cool happening with the community. And Elliott, thank you very much for putting this together. You're constantly a leader in a way that I really admire.